So as you've been working through this code project, you might have noticed that you might have had some errors. So one of the things that's really important to be able to know how to do with programming is being able to debug. And we already talked a little bit about it in step one, but let's go into a little bit more detail about that. So let's really focus on some common errors or problems that you might encounter. So one of the first things you might encounter is maybe you have names or variable or function names that aren't matching up. So let's talk about what that means. So for instance, we've said that things like spelling and spacing are important, right? They need to be consistent. So for example, let's look at the var player x here, okay? So I made the x a capital X, but let's see what happens if I make it a lowercase x. Okay, so I'm making a lowercase x for player x. All right, and now what happens if I run this? Okay, so now you look down in the console here and you see that you have a red text, which is an error message. And it says unquote reference error. Player X is not defined. Okay, so the error message, the type of error is an unquote reference error. The message is that player X is not defined, and notice it's player X with a capital X. And it also says sketch a line 19, so it gives you a line number. So line numbers are really important or helpful. Okay, so what we can do is look here at the line numbers on the side, and let's go down to line 19. All right, now if we read a little bit further here, it says P5JS says there's an error due to player X not being defined in the current scope. All right, so sometimes you'll have more information that the P5JS editor will give you. All right, and it says if you have defined it in your code, you should check its scope, spelling, and letter casing. JavaScript is case sensitive, all right? And then sometimes they have links that you can click on to give you extra information about what some of the messages that they're giving you might mean. So those are something that's really good to click on as well. But let's go ahead and look at line 19 here. So we see that, okay, I am trying to use player X with a capital X, but it's saying it's not defined. And that's because what we created was we created player X with a lowercase x. All right. So when we're down here and we're trying to call and use a variable called player X with a capital X, it doesn't recognize that because we didn't do var player with X with a capital X. Okay. So let's go back and fix that to what we originally had it as. Okay. Some other similar unquote errors or unquote reference errors that we might have might include functions when we're trying to call functions. So, we have the create canvas method, for instance, or the create canvas function that's built into P5JS that we're using. So if we like maybe forget a word or forget a letter or do the different capitalization. So let's just misspell it this time. So instead of canvas, let's misspell it with two S's maybe. Oh yeah, two S's. Okay. So now when we run this, it says that it's not defined. Create canvas is not defined. All right. So, look out for errors like that. And notice that if you write a function name and it goes to a bold blue text like that, it's a built-in P5JS function. So if you think that you're calling a built-in function, but it's not, the text isn't bold and blue like that, then watch out, because maybe you're misspelling, or you're giving it the wrong name or something like this. Okay. So those are a couple of common errors. Now something else, we've talked about spacing. So like for instance, with variable names, you can't have spaces. Okay. So now let's see if we run this. So we have a syntax error. That gives us a syntax error. And this is a little bit more, it tells us line 4, but it says unexpected identifier. But something that we can also notice is that sometimes if you have like these squiggly, like a red squiggly line somewhere in your code, if you put your mouse over it, it will give you a clue as to what might be happening. So it says, well, okay, I'm missing a semicolon. So that's a little odd. And then it says underneath of sprite, there's a orange line. It says expected an assignment or function call and instead saw an expression. All right. So it doesn't explicitly tell you that we were trying to, it doesn't, the compiler, the program doesn't know that player sprite was supposed to be one variable name. It's supposed to be all part of one variable name. But one of the things that we know that we need to look out for is that if we're making variable names or function names, they need to be all one word. So that's something else to look out for as well. Another common error, wrong number of arguments. So let's say that we are trying to call the image function and we don't, let's say we take out the treasure sprite argument. Now let's see what happens now. Okay, so it says fail to execute. So we have, it says the provided value is not of type CSS image value, or so on, and it tells us it's in line 20. So again, the messaging on this is a little bit, might be a little bit difficult to understand, but again, it gives us a helpful message. It says it was expecting, image was expecting an image element for the first parameter and received a number instead. So that lets us know, it says, okay, the first parameter was supposed to be some sort of an image element, okay, but it gives us but we gave it a number instead. So that should be a bit of a clue for you that, all right, so I'm not supposed to have a number for my first argument. All right, so we can put this back. Okay, and again, this is also why order matters, because even if I have the right number of arguments, but I put maybe like the treasure X first, treasure X is a number, right? If I do that, then I'm going to get that same, I'm going to get another error about the parameters and, the order of parameters, okay? And again, here they give you a link that you can click on that tells you more about image, the image function. So it basically a reference that lets you know how to use the image function, the load image function, okay? So, you can read further down for a description of what the function does, the syntax, how you're supposed to use it, the arguments that you're supposed to pass, and whatnot, all right? So let's go ahead and put this back. Okay, so we'll put this back. And let's try something else with incorrect parameters. So let's do create canvas, and we said that we were passing in 2 numerical arguments. Let's pass in more numbers. Let's pass in 65. I don't know why we would do this, but let's just give it a try and see what happens here. Okay. Okay, so treasure is not defined. And okay, so yes, I forgot to fix my treasure X. Okay, so again, I put treasure back but I should have put treasure X because there's no treasure variable. So let me go ahead and fix that. Okay, now what we were looking at, what we were trying to do here was add more parameters to create canvas. Now this says create canvas was expecting no more than 3 arguments, but it received 4. Okay, so if you look at the documentation for this, for create canvas, there is actually an option to pass in 3 parameters. So, we might have even been okay if we just passed in 3 numbers, but it explicitly said it's expecting no more than 3 arguments, and we passed it 4. Okay? So, if you have a message like this, make sure that you are passing in the right number of parameters. And similarly, if I don't pass in enough, it says that create canvas was expecting at least 2 arguments, but received only 1. Okay? So another common mistake to look out for. So if you have encountered any of those errors or something similar when you've been following along with the code, go back and see if you can look at the console and maybe work backwards and figure out what might be happening with your code.